I'm Alex Del Sordo. And we have Jess Eddy. It's Kevin Sauer. Nita DeFrance. Eric Murray. It's Mahe Drysdale. It is Sir Matthew Pinson. Thank you for being here. I'm Alex Del Sordo, Rower's Choice, and you've been listening or watching our podcast now for about 2 years. We've talked to athletes, we've talked to coaches, we've talked to people in the industry, outside the industry, but I've never spoken to somebody at a very high leadership position. This is Nobu Ishizuka, and he is the chair and president of USRowing board. And I got to tell you, there are a lot of things have happened, some really exciting stuff with USRowing. That we're going to get into. So, Nobu, thanks for taking the time today to talk to me.
Thank you, Alex. No pressure here.
No, yeah, believe me, no pressure. Luckily, this thing's edited. Nobu, this is wonderful because I know nothing about you. I don't know anything about your background. And in every interview, I ask the same question. How old were you and where were you when you took your first stroke in a boat?
Well, I was a freshman in the dorm of Columbia College, and I had 3 suite mates who were going out very early every morning and coming back incredibly excited and enthusiastic about this new sport that they had taken up. And I decided after about a month of this that I had to go out and join them and see for myself what was so unique and exciting about it. And from the first moment I got into a boat and took that first stroke, I was hooked.
I mean, that's sort of the same thing I hear from everybody. I mean, anybody in this sport, you fall in love with it almost immediately. So I don't want to age you too much here, but Nobu, like, what year was that? How long have you been in the sport of rowing?
Yes, that was 1978, believe it or not.
Oh.
The age of wooden polecocks and Macon blades, wooden oars, before carbon fiber. Actually, it was the end of my freshman year at the Eastern Sprints where I saw my first carbo craft.
Wow. So did you carry through Columbia all the way through all 4 years? Like, were you a rower from then on at the college?
I rowed in the lightweight crew and made it through about a year and a half. And that was a period of time when I decided I wanted to go to law school and needed to buckle down with my studies. So that's the direction I went in. I took up running instead, and then took a little bit of a detour during law school. But after that, I came back to the sport because, like for a lot of people, once it gets into your blood, it is really hard to get it out.
Yeah, it makes me smile, right? I love that. Where did you pick back up rowing? Where were you? How old were you, and where were you in the world?
Yeah, I was a junior associate at a Wall Street law firm and joined the New York Athletic Club at the time, and they still do have a very active masters club within it. And so I just started getting back out on the water, driving up with a friend at 5 a.m, rowing on the water by 6, off the water by 7, back and at my desk by 9 a.m. So that was my routine, 3 days a week, and kept that up until I went off to Asia for 18 years.
Holy cow. Asia for 18 years. Oh my
Asia, 18 years, yes. And was very active on the masters rowing scene in Tokyo, Hong Kong, China, Australia. So
did you win any big races over there? Did you
it was the first time that I ever won a race. That's when I went over. Your listeners probably can't see me very well just on the screen, but I'm about as least suited for rowing as anybody out there, given my physical makeup. I'm in that spot that I think a lot of people in the sport find themselves in, where they're too large to be a Cox, but a little too small to be really competitive, not in rowing. But in Asia, and this is one of my arguments for why lightweight rowing should be retained, is that there are a lot of people that have my physical makeup and have the opportunity to compete with each other at reasonably high levels. And without that sort of pool of enthusiasm and numbers of rowers, it's really not as fun. So I really felt like I kind of found a home in rowing out in Asia.
I love that. Found a home. There was back in the 90s and early 2000s, they had midweight rowing, and it was perfect for, I was like a midweight. When I was 17, 16, I was an awkward 170 pounds or 165 pounds. It's unfortunate. And I always joked about a guy that was my coxswain who later wrote a little bit. His name's Matt. He was like a piece of iron. This little guy, man. It's the little guys that I think are the toughest out there, man. It's not the big, strong 6'6" dudes. It's the 5'7", 145-pound men and women out there that are tough as nails.
I'm a big proponent of strength to weight ratios.
You would be, of course, you would be. Now, this is interesting. So your career is in law, but like, why did you go after the position of president and board of USRowing? I mean, I don't know anybody. I've never met anybody that was that role. I haven't met them in my life. Why did you do it? Why did you take the position?
Well, I think the short answer is they couldn't find anybody else to do it.
I like that.
I kind of fell into it. I'm not a natural choice for the role in a lot of different ways. I'm probably about as much of an outsider as you can get in the sport and still be in a leadership position. I have been away from the country, not from the sport, but for a significant amount of time. Mm-hmm. While I was here, I was not a prominent member of the rowing community. I don't have deep roots or contacts even within the sport here. I'm not a competitive rower in the sense that I don't have the pedigree of having been on a national team or have represented the United States in any way internationally. But there were a couple of skills that I think the board was looking for at the time. I joined the board in 2018, and it was a period when the board and the organization was going through some pretty significant changes, particularly on the governance front. And my career in law happened to give me a background in working with CEOs, boards, senior management of organizations. It gave me the experience to know what the boundaries are in terms of duties and responsibilities of organizations. And I think the most important skill that I came away with from my legal career was the ability to navigate difficult situations with a lack of information, with a lot at stake, politically, economically, legally. So I had some base of knowledge and experience on how to help organizations navigate through difficulties. And I think that put me in a position to head up the governance committee. There were a number of reforms that people wanted to make. So I helped our CEO at the time, Marcia Schooper, work through some of those changes, which included CEO turnover and a very difficult financial situation. Together with,
let me jump in really quick. How much time commitment is a role like this? Like how could you give me hours a week, or like how do you map that out?
I haven't been keeping track. but over the past months since I took on the job in March, I would say that I spend about 4 to 5 hours a day
Wow.
on US rowing matters.
There's US rowing, in my mind, is broken up into many, 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 many categories. And the younger generation tends to focus on the juniors and the coaches and the 30-year-olds, the 20-year-olds. I don't think they really understand how much time goes into the governance of US rowing. 4 to 5 hours a day is an incredible amount of time to be spending on something that I guess you're donating your time to this, right? I mean, this is a time donation for you. This is you're not the CEO of the organization. You are overseeing the board. I mean, it's an incredible amount of time, Nobu. It really is.
Yeah, but think about the challenges that we face as an organization. It is an incredibly diverse place that covers everything from the grassroots to the elite levels, huge geographic space, a lot of different interests, an incredibly passionate community. And we have been in a difficult situation with CEO turnover, the pandemic, some legal issues that have arisen, and a real need to try to make progress on positive organizational change, starting with a very labor-intensive effort to get out the vote, to amend our bylaws, to put in a different board structure, while at the same time trying to manage expectations around our high performance program, which needs to be reformed as well in the wake of our performance in Tokyo, and before that, Rio.
Well, you had a perfect transition into, I want to know, and you, from your perspective, the changes that have happened. The vote went through. I think it was 75% said yes. What are the changes to the bylaws? If you can truncate it down to maybe a 2-minute explanation, what's actually happening now moving forward with the change in bylaws?
Right. We're reducing the size of our board, and we're balancing the representation on the board among 3 key groups. The first being our regional representatives, which bring the voices of all the clubs, including the collegiate ranks, into the boardroom. And I include among that the junior programs, everything that constitutes what's defined as an organizational member. Okay. Then the athletes. We are required to have athlete representation on the board, and these are incredibly important voices to bring the athlete perspective. And when I speak of the athlete perspective, I'm referring specifically to athletes who have represented the U.S. in international competition. And then the final one, where we placed the most importance on for this vote, was expanding our ability to bring in people with specialized expertise that we may need at any given time. That could be financial, legal, subject matter based expertise, which we were limited in being able to access until these changes were.
So irrelevant to rowing. These are basically independents. It does not matter if they've ever rowed or not, correct?
Doesn't matter, exactly.
Now, so you've been focused on the law for so long. You brought these changes in. I'm assuming you really pushed for them because of your experience in other industries, in other workings with CEOs and other large companies. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair. I mentioned earlier the need to be able to navigate difficult situations with lack of information. The simple fact of the matter is you can't make good decisions unless you have good information and all the information that you need. And for us as a board, in order to get that information, you need to expand the number and types of voices that are around the table when you're discussing these difficult issues. And that's why that change was important for us.
Now, I checked it out a little bit here, and there was I guess you can correct me here. There's about 1,400 voters, is that correct, that could have voted, and 416 voted. What does that tell you about the results? I mean, were you expecting more votes? Were you expecting about that? Because I think 75% agreed out of the 416 or 400 and something. Explain to me what that means to you.
I'm glad you asked that question because I've spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about how we were going to approach this. This is not the first time we've tried to change the board and the bylaws. The last time was in 2017, and we have the data from that vote. It was a 15% turnout, okay? And it was voted down along a 50-50 vote, which means we needed a 2/3 vote to pass, and the measure failed in 2017 because it was a 50-50 vote. There were 250 votes cast, which meant there were 125 negative votes that were cast in 2017, which were sufficient to defeat the measure, okay? Which means we would have needed 375 votes, assuming the same turnout as last time, okay? The higher the turnout you get, the higher the number of negative votes are required to defeat the measure. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to achieve was a 500 vote, 500 votes cast was my target, because that would have required a significant negative vote in order to defeat it. As it turned out, we ended up with 416 votes. Okay. There were 108 negative votes cast. There had to be 138 negative votes cast to defeat the measure. So placing this number 416 in context, we did quite well because my bottom line number was 375 total votes. I was aiming for 500 total votes, and we ended up with 416. And as it turned out, we ended up with fewer negative votes this time than we did in 2017. So that's why the margin of the approval was so high.
So this is a in your mind, this is a victory, right? That this is a positive thing that
it's pretty convincing. And we knew the members wanted change because during the course of my outreach, which included 6 information sessions that were open to all organizational members, 2 of those were targeted audiences based on requests we had received. I did a straw poll during each meeting, and the results were overwhelmingly positive in response to the question, how important is organizational change to you? And do you think that this proposal will help achieve that? So I knew we were on the right track. It was a self-selected group, but it indicated to me that we were on the right track.
So I want to word this correctly, and hopefully if CJ needs to edit this is the chance to edit. So CJ, put a little mark here. The way I see it, like board members that run the thing are in their 60s, possibly 70s. And in my mind, they're disconnected to the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds, and they're disconnected from the sport of rowing, right? Because maybe most of them haven't rowed in years and decades or haven't competed. In your mind, is that a problem? Like that there's less people are dedicated or not dedicated, that they're connected to the sport. Maybe they not know what's actually happening.
Yeah, this is one of the themes that I've heard pretty consistently during my outreach, and it's the fact that the perception of disconnection exists is a definite issue. But we have to ask ourselves, why is disconnection a problem? Because the responsibility of a board is to operate at a strategic level and to ensure the financial health of the organization. And it is not the job of a board to get into the management weeds and be involved in the day-to-day management of the organization. Okay. So by nature, the function of a board will remove it from the day-to-day interactions with the clubs and the membership if it's performing its duties in the right way. Okay. But I think the perception, my interpretation of the perception of disconnection comes from our inability to make improvements in the delivery of the organization's services. The three areas of competency and confidence, credibility, I think, lead to this perception of disconnection. Right? If members and participants in the sport feel that promises aren't being delivered on, if they feel that the services they expect are not being delivered in a competent or timely way, or if there's a lack of consistency in how the organization responds to issues, then there's going to be not only a feeling of dissatisfaction and disaffection, but there is going to be a sense that the organization is not connected to the needs of the members. And it's only natural that people would think that the board sitting on top of the organization has to take responsibility for that. So from that perspective, I completely agree that we are disconnected if that's the definition that people are using.
Do me a favor and explain to me the goal or the intent or what you're trying to accomplish as the board in the next, say, 3 to 5 years. Like, what's your identity as the board right now? What are you guys trying to achieve as an organization?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, our primary duty is hiring the CEO and ensuring the financial health of the organization. That's the top priority.
Got that.
Below that, positive organizational change is what I, as chair, would like to see of the entire organization. And that includes how the board functions and the competencies that we have on our board.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess, and this is me being naive or maybe ignorant to it. I thought the answer was going to be, this may sound silly, like we want to see USRowing win the gold medal at the Olympics, or we want to see junior rowing increase by 150% because we want to see it grow. But it's not that defined, right? That's the definition of USRowing's organization that runs the day-to-day, right? Yours is financial stability and hiring the CEO.
Right. But you're absolutely right. That's not enough. There has to be a strategic vision. That is also our job. I say positive organizational change because so much flows from that. Okay. Let me just give one example. Medals. Okay. Now, we are judged by the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee by the number of medals rowing earns at each games.
Yeah,
that's an unmistakable fact. But it's also true that a medals only focus leads to issues. For example, one of the problems we've been having is athlete well-being, physical and mental.
Yeah.
And if an organization treats its athletes like cogs in a machine that are disposable and aren't sufficiently attuned to the life goals, as well as the rowing goals of these individuals who sacrifice an incredible amount to pursue their dreams, we are not serving the best interests of that group. Now, if we looked at it in a different way and didn't look at it in terms of medals, but if we looked at it in terms of this organizational change I'm talking about, which means what if we improve the culture in the teams, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning we started getting away from treating our athletes in a certain way, a negative way. What if we built the proper infrastructure so that there was a seamlessness to their experience where they can focus purely on their performance, okay, in a way that they felt supported in their, not only their rowing goals, but their life goals. Yep. If we get those two pieces right, then my belief is that will lead to the medals. The medals will be a product of getting those other things right. That's why I lead with that in that specific example.
In the very beginning, we were talking about just how diverse this organization is, how difficult it is to move them. You're moving 1,000-pound boulder, right? I know that junior coaches and some of our audience are going to want to know, how long does this take, right? How long does it take before we start seeing changes, significant changes, or is it going to be so subtle and slow? Because again, your experience, right? You've been doing this your entire career, so you know hopefully how to answer this question. It's just, are we going to see changes immediately, or is it, how long does this, something like this change? Culture change, financial stability. In my mind, it's like we're walking up this hill and it ain't budging.
Yeah. Speed is an issue here. I'll give you an example. I believe we have not been sufficiently changing with the environment that we're in. Okay. We have to look at your question from the perspective of expectations. And let me take diversity and inclusion as an example. Okay. How long does it take to achieve something like that? What is the end goal? What does it look like? Okay. One area where we haven't been keeping up is demographic change in this country. Okay. The largest growing population in the United States of non-white Americans is in the 16 and below demographic. Okay. And for the first time, the white population in this country declined I believe during the last census, okay, during the last 10 years. The first time ever in the country's history that happened, okay? If the country is changing in that way, and we are not changing along with it, we are going to get left behind. But how do we start the process of having our sport reflect the country that we live in, right? By providing access around our geographically limited sport, where it can only exist around natural bodies of water, right? That process of change can take a while, but we are making progress on that front. That's an example of evolutionary change, but that has to be purposeful. We have to intentionally go out and try to make that change. And that's that's a big part of what Amanda Kraus, our CEO, is focused on. But there are real organizational reasons why we should do that. It's not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's because it's what the sport needs. I'll give you another example. Organizations like ours, and it's not just in sport, it's across industries, the business world, other nonprofits. Because of the failure of the political process to address basic expectations and needs of citizens, such as social justice, police reform, climate change, they expect us to play our role and be those agents of change. Okay. Yeah. That is a much bigger scope of expectation than has existed beyond 10, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And if an organization doesn't evolve with the changing environment, then it will be in a perpetual state of arrested development. And in a sense, that's where the organization has been. It's been slow to adapt and slow to change. And so if you ask the question of timing, at a minimum, we have to change at the same pace that the world around us is changing.
That's a difficult thing to do. I hear in your voice, you don't come from a bad place. Like, you want this to happen, right? And the possibly misconception, is that a lot of folks in this world of ours, in this US rowing world, they don't think that the governing board has good intentions, but they also don't understand how difficult it is to do what you're doing. And I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah, part of it is self-inflicted. I won't shy away from owning our responsibility to communicate more effectively what we're really trying to do, right?
Yeah.
And what we really want to achieve for the sport and for the organization. We tend not to be good at doing that. We have to change that approach as well, which is why I really appreciate the opportunity to do this podcast with you.
I have two final questions. First is, and it's a simple yes or no. Are you optimistic, now having been in the position since March, that we as an organization are going to get into a financially stronger position? Are you optimistic that that's going to happen?
Absolutely. We hired Amanda Krause because of her proven ability to fundraise in a nonprofit environment. We are a much bigger organization than the organization in Row, New York, which is where she came from.
Yep.
And the challenges are a lot bigger. But I think if we approach the issue of financial stability in the same way that we've been approaching all the other change that we've been trying to achieve, that we will get there.
I like that. So last question. Pretend I'm in a room with 5,000 coaches and rowers. Nobu, what can I do as an individual, as a business owner, business leader, but also as a rower? What can I do to right the ship of US rowing? What responsibility can I take now to help the board and the organization?
Listen and build confidence towards establishing trust in each other. Leave behind the past and try to form a more positive view of the future, and not in one big step, but through incremental change. The passion that all of our members and the rowing community brings to the sport is a two-edged sword. It's a huge positive, but it also comes with a lot of history, a lot of factionalism, for lack of a better word, and because of a long pattern of unkept promises and disappointments, it's built up a lack of trust. And in certain cases, these feelings can be so entrenched that you can feel that we would never get over it. The only real way to do this is through small, incremental, confidence-building steps. So much like General McCraven said about getting up every morning and making your bed, and that is the start of a successful day, which leads to a successful life pattern. Those are the sort of things I think we should really start trying to do as a community.
In order for us to listen, you all need to talk. So I'd say if you can get anything from this interview, this sit down is we want to hear more from you. And I've learned this as a business leader myself. It might not have to be the perfect message. You might have to take hours to write it, as long as you just get it out there, get the message out there. Nobu, I can't thank you enough, man. I learned a lot actually in this interview. And this is the first time that we've not talked about rowing strokes and training. And I got to learn something. I hope you enjoyed it too, man. I can't thank you enough for doing this.
I did. It was really enjoyable. Thank you for the opportunity, Alex. And yeah, I completely agree. Let's keep the dialogue going and let's listen to each other.
There it is. Now you can learn more about Nobu and the organization. We're going to be providing links in this interview. More from us soon. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Alex Del Sordo. It's Kevin Sauer. Eric Murray. It's Mahe Drysdale. It is Sir Matthew Pinson. Thank you for being here.